Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our virtual Meet the Expert session. My name is David and I'm part of the My World of Work Live team with Skills Development Scotland. My World of Work Live is about helping you to understand what jobs Scotland are going to require in the future and to also help you get the skills you need for them. So in today's session, we're going to talk about engineering sector. We're going to look at opportunities in the sector, and I'm going to introduce you to our experts for today, Roy Stenhouse and Emma Sweargan. We're also going to allow you the opportunity to ask any questions you may have. I would encourage you to get involved as much as possible, so please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to ask us any questions. As we go through, we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can. I would just like you to know that today's session is being recorded so that young people who could not make it today can still access the resources. It will be available for everyone to watch on the My World of Work Live playlist on the My World of Work YouTube channel. This means you can go back and rewatch everything that's been talked about today. If you're feeling a little shy, don't worry. Everything you ask today can be anonymous and you can select that option on the Q&A box. So just before I introduce today's experts, let's have a look at some labour market information. So the average UK salary is around 43,160, and the majority of UK engineers are employed full-time. Entry routes can be through college, university, modern apprenticeships and graduate apprenticeships. You can also do a foundation apprenticeship in engineering skills as well. Generally, women are underrepresented in the engineering sector, but this is something that the industry is trying to encourage women to get involved. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to our experts, Emma and Roy, and we'll go to you first, Roy. And if you just tell us a wee bit about yourself and give the people watching a wee understanding of who you are and what you do.
Great, thanks very much, David. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roy Stenhouse, as David kindly introduced me. I'm a project manager within the OGTC, and we're focused on technologies that are driving the energy transition. And Emma, who's on the call with us today, will explain what the energy transition is. So the OGTC is an organisation that is funded by both the Holyrood and Westminster governments to the tune of £180 million over 10 years. We were set up in 2016, where we were actually there to help identify ways to improve technology development and adoption in the oil and gas sector with a low carbon intent. But since about 2019, early 2020, we've been really focused on the energy transition and in particular areas around hydrogen production, hydrogen storage, hydrogen transportation. We've also been looking at carbon capture, utilisation and storage technologies, and we're into renewables, tidal, wave and wind. And just to help explain a bit about the gender balance, we've got 55% females in our organisation. So we've got a really diverse organisation. So I'm quite an old guy. I'm born in the 70s. I actually had a firm fix of going into oil and gas industry, but I thought I was going to be an accountant. I enjoyed working with numbers, but I never actually went that route. And I've been in the industry now for 24 years. I've travelled the globe, and I've had both junior, senior engineering roles. I've had very senior project manager roles. I've had senior leadership roles, and I've even got to the point where I was running an entire business within the oil and gas sector. And at that point, I'll quite happily hand over to Emma.
Hi all, I'm Emma Swergan, a project engineer focused on the energy transition, namely renewables, energy storage, hydrogen and CCUS. But what is the actual energy transition? So it is a pathway towards the transformation of the global energy sector from fossil-based energies to renewable energy sources. So the UK has targets of net zero by 2050 and Scotland has a closer target of 2045. So net zero actually means achieving a balance between the carbon emitted into the atmosphere and the carbon removed from it. So we'll meet net zero when the amount of carbon we add to the atmosphere is no more than the amount removed. So how did I get into this industry and where did it all start? So if we go back to when I was in school, I went right through to sixth form, so the equivalent for Scotland is right through until you're 18. I then didn't really know if I wanted to go to university or not, but I wasn't fully sure of the opportunities available to me. So I decided to go to university, do geography, as it was my favourite subject at school. And I wasn't really thinking about jobs or careers at this time. I was just thinking, what does the next 3 years at university hold? Went through that, loved it, still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went on and did a master's in environmental modelling. Came out of that and applied for a variety of jobs. So some in mapping, some in environmental consultancies, some as modellers, and one in technical safety, which is where I actually ended up. So I ended up doing a 3-month role at a company called ERM as a technical safety consultant, and then actually ended up staying 6.5 years and worked my way up to senior consultant. So within that role, I worked with global oil and gas companies, mainly focused on offshore oil and gas, technical safety, essentially making sure platforms didn't blow up and kill people. So did a lot of that. But then towards the end of it, my company started getting more into renewable projects, but there wasn't really a lot of it to go around. And I started to realise I actually wanted to get back to my roots a little bit, because when I was at university, some of the modules I enjoyed most were around climate change and how we can make a difference and an impact. So I started to look at what jobs were out there now in that space, and that's how I found the energy transition. It seemed really interesting. I'd been to a couple of talks at the OGTC and was really fascinated by the work they were doing. So I actually saw a post for a job go up, and I was like, right, that's what I want to do. Applied for it, was lucky enough to get that job, and that's how I ended up where I am today.
Excellent. So what we'll do is we'll just start with you, if that's all right, Emma, since you're on the screen already. So what does a standard day look like for you then?
So a day for me is rarely the same, to be honest. It's a lot of team meetings to discuss workload, any issues we've got for that today. We attend a lot of webinars to understand more about specific topics, any new reports that have been released in this space so that we can keep up to date with what's going on across the globe. We run workshops to get answers to specific questions. So one I ran this week was looking at pipeline routings from the UK to the Netherlands and where we can reuse existing pipelines. We're also being on panel sessions, answering questions about specific topics or projects we've ran, talking to developers to review their ideas that they have and what technology they've got that's coming up and how we can help them, reviewing reports, writing business cases, mentoring interns, being on the social committee, so more of a fun aspect of my job. So coming up with fun things for the company to do, which has been quite challenging virtually because I think everyone is fed up of a quiz. But yeah, day to day, it's a lot different, but it keeps you on your toes.
Excellent. So what we'll do is I've got a few questions coming in. So what I'll do is I'll pick one which will actually complement that. So obviously we've been living under COVID restrictions for a while now. Has that impacted on the way you do your job?
So it has a little bit, because it's not as easy to just dip in and out of conversations as you would in the office. And a lot of the information you pick up is around the coffee machine. You'll pick up on a little issue or a problem, and you get to have a lot more smaller conversations and overhear things, whereas virtually that's a lot more difficult to do. But I think one of the other things that COVID has actually brought to us is a lot more webinars are accessible, so you can go to a lot more and find out different things. So there's good and bads about it.
Yeah, excellent. So what we'll do is we'll just jump across to Roy, and we're going to put the same questions to you to begin with, Roy. So first off, what does a sort of day-to-day look like for purposes of the work you do?
Yeah, so thanks for that. I mean, clearly very similar to Emma. We work very closely together, and effectively my day really starts on asking my squawking box in the corner to switch on my lights and make my coffee, and then tell me all about my diary for the day because I've connected my computer up to my squawking box. But yeah, really, it's such a varied job. We're so lucky to be accessing some of the technologies, some of the thinking, some of the thought leadership about what we think the future holds. So our day really is as diverse and as difficult as Emma described, and each day is a learning day, and I've always believed in that, even in 24 years, that there isn't a day goes by I don't learn something new. I mean, I've only been with the OGTC 20 months, and sorry, 12 months, and the reality is I've learned so much in those 12 months around the energy transition. But the reality is I've come from an oil and gas background, so the actual transfer of my skills has been relatively easy. So that my day is not very different.
Excellent. So what we'll do is there's a few questions here. So I'll start with you with this one, Roy. What are the biggest challenges facing Scotland on transitioning towards zero carbon?
It's a good question. I mean, 2045 is coming at us really, really rapidly. And if you really look at some of the guidance that the Climate Change Committee, the CCC, have put out, we're absolutely nowhere close to getting to net zero, even with all of the ongoing projects that are in the public domain. We're so far away from that, it is quite frightening. But I think the big challenge is we currently don't have the manufacturing of some of the key technologies, and such things as carbon capture. That isn't a technology created in the UK. Hydrogen production through electrolysis, that's another technology not created today. And I'm not meaning just in Scotland, but in the UK in general, we lack some real opportunity. And the same goes for offshore floating wind, or offshore fixed wind, or even onshore wind. We don't actually have the manufacturing of these devices actually in Scotland or the UK. So I think the biggest challenge is we're going to have to import some serious technology in order to really get there. So I think for me, that's one of the biggest challenges that's facing us from a technology perspective.
Well, that's pretty interesting. So what we'll do is we'll move across to Emma and see if there's anything Emma would like to add that maybe we've not covered.
Yeah, so to just add to what Roy was saying, I think another challenge is also some of the legislation and the regulatory points around it. So at the moment for offshore wind, there's a 7-year period to get everything licensed and out there. And if we want to meet some of our targets, some of these regulations and legislation are going to have to change, because sometimes we've got the technology, we've gone through everything Roy's spoken about, but there's just a lag to get actual technology out there. So I think some of this is going to have to change and speed it up, otherwise we're just never going to hit our goals.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not actually that far away. That might just be speaking as an old person, but it's not. It doesn't really seem that far away. So I've got a question here, which is obviously we're talking about carbon capture, utilisation, and storage mainly here. I've got a question here saying, will there be jobs for young people available in this in the future? And what would that? How would we see that working?
So there will be jobs for young people in the future. The exact jobs, I'm not sure that we're fully aware of what they'll be. So there'll obviously be some of the roles that are existing now, but it's like my job and my role didn't exist when I started my career 6-7 years ago. So yeah. I think there's always new jobs coming out there, and exactly what those are, we just don't know, because the energy transition is moving so quickly and it's so fast paced that there's new stuff coming up all the time. But there will definitely be roles out there because it's an industry that we need, and it's shown that by how quickly it's grown. So it's only going to grow any bit bigger.
Yeah, that's fair. So we'll just flip over to Roy. So Have you got anything you would like to add on that, Roy?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I know we're talking about engineering today, but the whole industry relies on people and skills from a whole background. You've got, you know, real detailed engineering type people, but you also have commercial, accountancy, lawyers, legal, so there's a whole raft of careers out there that will support this industry as much as the technical ones. And Emma's right, we don't really know yet what the courses will be required for the type of skill that's needed completely, but there is a whole raft of opportunity out there that we have to consider that exists today. And you know, engineering is just a small part of it, but to support a project, you need a whole bunch of resources that doesn't necessarily mean you need a technical background.
Yeah. And what you are both saying is quite true, because obviously there's a few sectors where there's occupations today that even go back 10, 20 years, nobody really would have known they existed. So so what we're gonna, let's see. So we're gonna give you a wee easy question. So what are the most enjoyable parts of your job, and what do you find particularly challenging?
Important parts of the job and fun parts. I suppose the big bit for me is the team. I mean, when you're a project manager, your team around you, you know, I've always had the saying that if we look good, then our leadership looks good. So I've got a really good team. I've got Emma, who I work very closely with. So the fun part for me is getting to know the team, getting to understand how they work, getting to know how we can work together. And you know, because if there's a bit of trust and honesty between each parties, you get a lot out of it, and nobody worries about that call at you know, if you're in the middle of a big project, that call that says, "Oh dear, everything down, we've got a problem," you know. But you know, the enjoyable part for me is definitely seeing a doodle that we you know, a little sketch, you know, that turns into reality. That to me is the exciting part. And what's challenging is really sometimes you don't know what you're going for. You have an idea of what the end goal is, but you haven't really figured out. It's like a career path. You might have an idea of what the end goal is, but the path there is very different to what you think it might be, and that can sometimes be challenging if you don't quite understand where the change is coming from. So,
right, excellent. So we'll pass over to Emma and let Emma have a crack at the two questions. So, most enjoyable, most important, or most challenging parts of your job?
So I think the most enjoyable is seeing something that you've been working on for a while actually come to fruition, and seeing it out there and make a difference and having an impact on stuff. And I think the most challenging is, obviously for our line of work, we get a lot of developers come to us with ideas and asking for funding, and there's only a certain amount that we can actually support. We don't have enough funding for everyone, unfortunately. And I think that's quite challenging, because you want to help everyone and help everyone's technology develop and make a difference, but actually sitting back and saying, right, this one or that one, that can be quite challenging sometimes.
I could imagine that would be. Okay, excellent. So do you have a favourite project you've worked on with the OGTC?
Oh, I'm actually going to steal Roy's thunder. I think it's similar for both of us, because we've actually been working on a project called the Orion project lately. So it's about energy hubs and bringing a lot of technology together. I'll let Roy explain a bit more about the actual project in a minute, so I don't steal all his thunder. But another one linked to it is we've been working on another energy hub project around Bacton, so down in England. And I think that was quite good, because it was an area that it's been overlooked for an energy hub. So there's energy hubs going on around Humber, Teesside, but it had actually been overlooked, but it has a lot of resources available to it, and it has a great prospect to be an energy hub. So being able to get them involved and actually see the potential that they've got was really enjoyable.
Excellent. So we'll flip over to Roy and let Roy elaborate a bit on this project.
Yeah, so thunder truly stolen for sure. No, not at all. Energy hubs for sure has been really exciting, and an energy hub is the Orion one is actually based in Shetland, and it's about bringing various energy technologies together. So we're talking about bringing potentially blue hydrogen, which is created using methane. And Orion or Shetland is already connected to the oil and gas sector, so it has a resource called methane, which pretty much is what heats your homes today. That is, if we combine that with steam methane reforming, which is a process, you can get blue hydrogen, but it's got a huge wind potential and a huge tidal sector. And it's about bringing all of that energy, or energy vectors we call them, but it's basically energy solutions together, and trying to figure out how you would use them to benefit the island, but also to benefit the local resources, the oil and gas facilities, and also how you would export some of that energy into the UK. And all of these energy hubs are all very unique depending on the resources. So for sure, these projects that we're talking about, there's going to be 15, 16 of these energy hubs pop up around the UK, and they're huge. You're very, very big projects, and they're all going to be unique based on what the resources they have available to them. But that is definitely up there as the most exciting projects for sure.
Fantastic. So I've actually got a wee question, which is you're talking about the aim to reach net zero. So how are we doing on that at the moment? Is there? I'm always frightened to ask this question, but how are we doing on that at the moment? How's it going?
I think if you read the Climate Committee Change report, we're certainly not got enough carbon capture projects moving forward. They're very low on the scale. But we've got quite a lot of work to decarbonise electricity supply. That's probably where the biggest challenge is, because it's powered by gas today. And I know there's a few apps out there for your phone that can tell you your area and how much energy is created through gas, through hydro, through wind. But I would say we're on the cusp of something really big, and I think in the next sort of 5 years, I think you'll see a huge acceleration towards 2045 and actually meeting that piece. But right now, I would say we're probably about 3 to 4 years behind that curve. It's an opinion of mine, but I think we're about 3 or 4 years behind to where we need to be. But I think the next 5 years we could be really accelerated. And the reason I say that is, if you think about working from home and COVID, nobody said you could do what we're doing today this easily. And 12 months down the line, we've probably moved 5, 6, 7 years into the digital space that we were not ready for, particularly the industries like us. So I think it's very viable that we can see a huge acceleration.
Excellent. So we'll just pop back across to Emma, and I'll give her a chance to, if there's anything she wants to add to what's been said there, or we'll move on to another question.
I think Roy's covered it all in that one.
That's grand. That's grand. So what we'll do is we'll just move on then. So I've got a question here. So it's just, do I need to go to college or university in order to work in this industry?
So I'd say nowadays you don't. There are apprenticeships that you can actually do. I don't have details of the exact ones to hand. This is something that you can find out more about on some of the websites, but there are other routes into the industry now, and it also depends on what type of job in the industry you actually want as well, as to whether the route would be more likely to be an apprenticeship or college or university. But I think there is a lot more options available nowadays than there was in the past.
Excellent. And we'll provide some links at the end for that as well. So we'll ask you this one first, but what advice would you give yourself when you were in school? And I'll ask you that first, because I think Roy's ages with me, so.
I think I'd say to myself, don't be afraid to say no to things. You don't have to agree to doing everything, and it's actually okay to not know exactly what you want to do when you leave school or university, or even a few years into a career or a job. It's okay to change, and no one's going to judge you for that. you can make your mind up at any point that something's not for you, and I think that actually takes courage to actually say, wait a minute, I'm here and it's not exactly what I want to do. And I think just don't be afraid of that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and it's well documented these days that people will generally change career something like 3 or 4 times through their lifetime. I won't tell you how many number of changes I'm on now, but let's just say it's a few. So what we'll do is we'll just shoot across to Roy and give Roy a chance to answer that as well. So
yeah, so I think, you know, similar to Emma, you know, part of my thought, I would say, is follow your passion. I started technically, I went through leadership, but I'm back technical again, and I enjoy it. But don't be scared to make mistakes also, because it's about learning. And Emma's right, you know, it's great if you had a career path laid out and things, but the reality is, you know, if you're following things you enjoy doing, it sort of doesn't turn into a job. It kind of feels like it's something that you can wake up every day and feel really passionate about going to. So I think follow your passion and don't be worried about making a mistake, because there's nobody perfect. And I absolutely think that learning is the biggest part of it. So.
Oh, definitely. And to be fair, as they say, you learn as much for the mistakes you make as you do for your successes as well. Sometimes even more. So it's always worth having the try. So I've got a question here. So what is the main goal for OGTC? So I think we've kind of covered a lot of this, but if you had to outline the one main goal, what would it be?
I think the main goal of the OGTC is to develop technology and get it commercialized and get it into industry. That there's one thing doing all the theory, but the reality is we want to see the technology adopted. So we want to see, you know, we want to fail fast, as we call it in our industry, where we see things developed. It maybe isn't right, but we then get an opportunity to redevelop it. But ultimately, we want to see commercialized technology out in the domain being used in the energy transition and in the net zero space.
Excellent. So we'll have another question and then we'll go back across to Emma. So what skills would you say are the most important skills in doing your job?
I would actually say people skills, getting to know people, being able to work with people, being inclusive for sure. You know, that there, you know, a lot of people think, you know, that you got to be really technical, but some people that are fabulous around people and with people get more out of them. So for me, the biggest skill is probably my people skills. I'm not perfect by any means, and Emma can definitely account for that, but I do think being personable around your team is probably a big skill that gets the best out of people, for sure. So that's my view on it for certain.
Excellent, excellent. So we'll pop across to Emma. So what about yourself, Emma? What would you say are the most important skills for you doing your job?
Yeah, so to add to what Roy was saying, he's quite right. It's team skills and personable skills, but also adding to that, problem solving, being able to listen to people and actually understand what they want, and being able to work in a team or by yourself. So there's a lot of times when something you're doing feeds into a bigger picture, and it's being able to understand that and being able to feed in as and when needed is quite a key skill to have, and it's one that takes time to work on, but once you've got it, then you've got it for life.
Yeah, excellent. So I've got another question here, and I'll put this one to you first, Emma. So the climate emergency is something some people are aware of. Not everybody's aware of exactly what the climate emergency is in Scotland and the focus we've got. So obviously there's going to be COP26 later this year. Is the OGTC playing a role at COP26 at all?
Yeah, so OGTC is involved in COP26. We have quite a lot of events going on in and around it. I know they're just setting up some of those now. I'm not fully aware of the exact ins and outs that they're doing, but I know they're setting up different sessions. They've got things going on with our TechX program. There's a lot of events and things that the OGTC are going to be putting out. So if you want to find anything out, it'll all be on our website. and our social media, but the exact what we're doing, I'm not fully sure yet.
That's excellent. And we'll have a link to the OGTC website later on as well. So what we'll do is we'll just pop across to Roy and see if there's anything he wants to add to that. And
I think Emma's covered it all. You know, I think the big question is COP26 going to be a face-to-face event or not? I think is the question that's still being answered. But no, we'll be fully involved in it. You know, much of the projects that we're working on will be showcase projects. The energy hubs that Emma kindly stole my thunder on, they'll certainly appear very strongly in this, because it is about climate change and it is about making difference. And the fact that we're doing these projects is the reason that we exist today. So I think you'll start to see showcasing of some of these exciting projects that both Emma and I are very passionate about.
excellent. So within the OTGC, obviously there's the roles you do, but what sort of other supporting roles does OTGC provide? Is there availability in other? I know you mentioned something about other departments like marketing, finance, things like that. What sort of occupations are there which support you?
So from a project side, finance plays a large part. Planning, so you know, people who can look at plans and develop them. You know, accountancy sits in there, legal sits in there for contracts, because we've got to make sure that we do things legally and are in support of the outcomes. We have business case development people who write business cases around justifying the economics, or you know, what will you get out of this and things. And we also have, you know, general admin staff who help take away some of the burden of some of the paperwork that needs to go on. So, you know, it's no different, in my opinion, to how a school would operate. It has, you know, right the way up from the people who keep the place nice and clean and tidy, right the way through the staffing. You know, they're always as a head, and our head is Colette Cohen, and she's our CEO. And then above Colette, we have a board who help direct and steer the big ship OGTC is. So there's a huge number of roles behind the scenes that really make it, and marketing is a big part of our business.
Excellent. That's a really good analogy, actually. Comparing it to a school, that works really well. So what we'll do is we'll shoot back across to Emma. So I've got a couple of questions here which are around how is the industry evolving, and what are OGTC doing to reduce oil and gas emissions?
So the industry is evolving quickly.
Yeah.
And every day things are changing. So there's new legislation, new policies coming out, there's new guidance, and things that everyone's looking at, the focus everyone's looking at changes so quickly. What we're doing to help reduce oil and gas emissions. So as Roy mentioned before, we both work in the energy system integration team, but we actually also have an emission reduction team. So their main focus is looking at this. How can they reduce emissions of existing oil and gas facilities? What can they do to help in that area? And then this also ties into some of the projects we're looking at. If you can electrify assets, that obviously reduces the carbon footprint as well. So there's a lot of projects we're doing. And I am going to direct you to the website again, because if you're interested in the specifics of these, there are some good examples and case studies of projects on there.
Fantastic. And again, we will put that link up later for you to see, so you can check it out. So what we'll do, we'll put this last one to you, and then we'll move across to Roy with it. But do you work weekends? What is your work-life balance like in your job?
So I try not to work weekends. Sometimes it's unavoidable, and there's certain things that just need looking at. But I think a lot of industries these days are the same, and especially with working from home, the temptation is just too much to sometimes turn it on, quickly look at your emails, and then you're like, oh, why did I do this? There's something there. But I try and avoid it. So I usually try and switch off on a Friday and then not think about it until a Monday. And my work-life balance, I think I'm quite lucky, because OGTC is quite flexible with the hours at the moment with being working from home. So they understand that things can get in the way, and I don't have any children myself, but people that do, they can work flexibly in different hours around meetings and things they've got on if they need to suddenly look after a child or pop out to do something. So I think it's quite a good balance that we've got at the moment. And we can change days sometimes. If you're feeling a bit tired, log off a bit early and then come in the next day and you feel more refreshed. So I think it's a good balance at the moment.
Excellent, excellent. And I think that's some very valid points you've made there as well, actually. So we'll quickly switch over to Roy. Have you anything you would like to say on work-life balance, Roy, a bit?
I think Emma's covered it all from the OGTC perspective, but way back in my career at the beginning, and this is how things have evolved, I would say, is I was working offshore on vessels, and I would be doing 20-hour days. I was the only person that was in charge of that project, and I would be the only person able to answer some of the technical queries. So things have moved on, so much, and I think the COVID working from home has really highlighted the fact that being at home, you have a whole bunch of different experiences and reasons to do things. Family is, I've got kids, and the reality is they come through the door at 3:15 in the afternoon and make a lot of noise. So yeah, and that's okay. And I think it's just recognizing that, and it's so different now. Even 12 months, 24 years ago, fair enough, but 12 months, what a shift! What a shift!
It has been a dramatic change in working practices. That's very true. So I've got one last question, and then we're out of time. As a young person, can I volunteer in this industry, or is there things I could do in my school to get involved?
It's a good question. I think because things have changed so much, I think there's more opportunities to become more involved in the industry. Can you volunteer? I have not known anybody to volunteer, but we have summer internships. We have opportunities for school leavers, like many other industries and many other organisations, school leavers to get that week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks experience. So I think volunteering is perhaps something I'm not familiar with, but certainly coming in as an 18-year-old, 17-year-old and doing some summer work, or even working during college time or university time is most likely to be paid. And we're very keen on that. That's the fair work principles that the Scottish Government put out, which is, not unpaid work. And the reality is we pay our internships and our summer students because that's the right thing to do.
Excellent. And I assume stuff like internships, people could find out more about that on the OGTC website.
Yeah, they're all available, and they're usually posted around, it's usually about May time, April, May time. So we've just missed the cutoff, but it's usually about April, May we start advertising, because we've got issues and projects that we feel somebody would benefit from coming in and learning about, and then we get the value at the end of it. So hence another reason for making the payment.
Excellent, fantastic. So finally, I would just like to thank you both for coming on today and telling us a bit about the OGTC and what you do. So that's us come to the end of the session. I'd like to say a big thank you to Roy and Emma for taking the time to join us today and gives an insight into the roles at OGTC. I found it really interesting. I hope you did too. If you need any information on advice, guidance, or all things careers, you can speak to your careers advisor in school, especially about any of the careers that have been talked about here today. You can also find all of the information that we were talking about with our experts today on the OGTC website, so that's ogtc.com. You can also find more about careers at My World of Work. You'll find lots of information on there to help you make choices about your career, or if you need some further inspiration on what to do. There's tools there that will help you understand your strengths and a lot of job profiles to explore. As mentioned earlier, this video, along with other expert sessions, will be put on My World of Work's YouTube channel under the My World of Work Live playlist. You can also check out apprenticeship.scot for more information on all things apprenticeships. We've got lots more sessions planned, so please check them out, and if any are interested, please register. Finally, a big thanks to Roy and Emma. Thanks for joining the session. Take care and have a lovely day.